I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got cannabis, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA.
Hello and welcome back to my channel, The Fanfic Fantasy. Join us as we explore the world of fanfiction and fantasy and bring you the best story and discussions. This is the fourth part of What If Tanjiro Became a Demon Instead of Nezuko. So give this video a like and subscribe for more videos in future, so let's get into the fanfic. They ended up talking late into the night, sitting in the Ingawa, with only the light of the moon as their illumination. While Tanjiro was unsure about going back inside the manor to talk, worried that they might be overheard, Zenitsu assured him that he would hear it if Nezuko or Inosuke woke up, or if Hisa approached. Now that he knew the superhuman extent of Zenitsu's hearing, Tanjiro did not doubt him. Feeling as though he owed Zenitsu just for being there in his moment of weakness, Tanjiro ended up talking about anything and everything. From his life back in the snowy mountains at home to the night that ruined it all, to the resulting training in Mount Sajiri, to the journey to find a cure. Everything. He wasn't sure how much of it Zenitsu actually understood, but the blonde proved to be a good listener. He nodded at certain points, smiled at Tanjiro's small jokes, and asked questions for clarification. It was as if Tanjiro was truly talking to someone, even though a single word did not pass his lips. It was great. It was magical. I don't think you should try to eat human food anymore, Tanjiro, Zenitsu told him as soon as he ran out of things to say. Or think. You should just tell Nezuko-chan your body couldn't handle it, so the two of us could cover for you. Inosuke is such a self-absorbed moron. He probably won't even notice you're not eating. Tanjiro thought about that, tilting his head. You really think that would work? Sure, Zenitsu waved off his concern. It's better than upsetting your stomach 3 or 4 times a day. That thing back there, with you having to throw it back up. That absolutely must not happen anymore, okay? Think about Nezuko-chan. She would be so worried. Tanjiro supposed he was right. Having to go through that every day would be very troublesome. No matter how hard Tanjiro tried to hide it, Nezuko would eventually find out. He nodded. Zenitsu smiled, giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. We'll distract Inosuke somehow. Nezuko-chan and I will team up. After that, his voice became dreamy. Or maybe Nezuko-chan and I will become closer with this. Nezuko-chan relying on me. Maybe Nezuko-chan and I could fall in love. Tanjiro gently flicked Zenitsu's forehead with his fingers. It seemed to snap him out of his burgeoning daydream, and Zenitsu laughed awkwardly. But I suppose you don't really approve of me as her suitor, do you? You gave off that impression, especially with your sound. Really? He didn't think he had been very obvious about his disapproval of Zenitsu, but he supposed the blonde could hear it. Tanjiro thought about it more. It was true that he didn't like Zenitsu at first, but that was before tonight. That was before he truly understood what kind of person Zenitsu was. Sure, he had his flaws, and Tanjiro did not like the way he proposes marriage to random women. But if Zenitsu was going to be faithful to Nezuko, knowing what he knew of Zenitsu now, Tanjiro had to admit Zenitsu wasn't half bad as a person. He smiled at the blonde. No, I don't disapprove. If you can make her happy, why not? Zenitsu's eyes widened. He certainly did not expect that. He seemed to be caught between gratitude and shock as he took both of Tanjiro's hands in his. I'll do my best. Tanjiro. No, Oni-san. It's way too early to call me that, Tanjiro thought with an unimpressed deadpan. If you don't stop, I'll change my mind. Tanjirou, Zenitsu amended, hugging him tight. Ah, this boy was so ridiculous. Tanjiro let out a chuckle as he let himself be embraced. It was then that he realized that the skies were lightening, turning more blue than the night sky's indigo. The sun was rising. They had ended up talking all night. Tanjiro felt a little bad for keeping Zenitsu awake for all these hours, but from the way the blonde was acting, he didn't seem to mind. He kept hugging the demon, talking about how he would not waste the trust Tanjiro has given him, how he would make Nezuko the happiest girl on earth. The morning silence was cut off by an enthusiastic yell, "Fight me!" Zenitsu screeched in surprise, clinging tighter onto Tanjiro in alarm. He turned his head in the direction of the voice, Inosuke, of course, who was now standing up and stretching his body to warm it up, and frowned, finally letting go of the demon as he yawned. Oh, it's just you. You really are a weirdo, aren't you? Why are you picking up a fight so early in the morning? Weak creatures get trampled, Inosuke reasoned as he settled into a fighting stance. Fighting beasts and getting stronger and stronger, it's the way of nature. Yeah, Zenitsu yawned again. Nezuko stirred from the commotion, letting out a soft groan as she lifted her head. She rubbed her eyes and blinked a few times, realizing that everyone was already up and about. She smiled. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Nezuko-chan. Zenitsu replied with hearts in his eyes. Fight me, Inosuke kept insisting. I would love to, Inosuke-san, but I'm still recovering, Nezuko replied, sitting up and pulling her yukata closer to her body. A mock battle would be a great exercise to start the day for sure, but I don't want to reopen my wounds. Gah, weak-ass shits, Inosuke grumbled, displeased. I could take you all on, even while injured. Please don't, Nezuko seriously replied. Exacerbating injuries could be deadly. You know, as if the great Hashibira Inosuke could be taken down by something like that. Inosuke replied, sounding very sure of himself. He turned his head in Tanjirou's direction, pointing at him decisively. You, Gonpakairu. Who's Gonpakairu? Tanjirou wondered. You're not injured, aren't ya? Fight me, for real, this time. Oh, he supposed he was Gonpakairu. Okay, Tanjirou thought about it. While he wasn't opposed to having a rematch with the boar boy, he had to admit he was not in mint condition. He had just pulled an all-nighter, and while all he did was sit down and talk all night, the lack of sleep was still getting to him, regardless. Zenitsu was already slipping into his futon with another yawn, presumably to take a nap, since resting was all they had to do in this manner, really. Tanjiro was tempted to do the same. He wouldn't have any problems sparring with Inosuke, but he wanted to at least catch some ZS first. He started to project his thoughts. No, only Zenitsu could understand him like that, with the blonde's superhuman hearing. Signing. No, only Nezuko knew the sign language they had created. How to communicate with Inosuke. Tanjiro remembered the fountain pen Yushiro had given him, taking it out with some pieces of paper. With that he quickly wrote down his message, before handing the paper to Inosuke with an apologetic smile. Huh? The boar boy looked puzzled as he glared at the sheet on his hands. Are you mocking me? This is useless. I don't know how to read or write. So hopeless, Zenitsu grumbled with a roll of his eyes. Be nice, Nezuko scolded as she stood up, walking over to grab the piece of paper Inosuke was holding. Tanjiro smiled at his sister sheepishly as she read it, relaying the information over to Inosuke. Oniai-chan says he would be more than happy to spar with you after he takes a nap. Nezuko handed the paper back to the boar boy, who stared at it quizzically and mouthed the words, as if he was trying to unlock the mysteries behind the characters. He seemed no longer interested in fighting at the moment, instead fixated on studying the strokes of Tanjirou's pen. Tanjiro and Nezuko looked up and met each other's gazes. An idea was starting to form between them, born from the interest that Inosuke's face was showing. Unsure, Tanjiro signed, need help. Nezuko shook her head and signed back, go sleep. I'll handle it. Suddenly, Inosuke crumpled the paper with a grumble. Nezuko took that as her cue. Inosuke-san, would you like to learn? Huh? Inosuke sounded annoyed. To read and write. Would you like to learn? Nezuko clarified. She wasn't a stranger to these kinds of things, as she was usually the one staying home to take care of their younger siblings. She was usually the one who had to teach them to read and write as well. Tanjiro figured Inosuke would be in good hands, having Nezuko as his teacher. Inosuke sputtered. I don't need to learn those. But would you like to? Inosuke hesitated. As Tanjiro settled down on a futon and closed his eyes, he thought he heard Inosuke mumble a soft, sure. Time moves faster when you have little to do, Tanjiro quickly realized. Sleeping, eating and relaxing was pretty much all they did in the manor. Weeks passed in relative harmony, with Zenitsu and Inosuke's bickering being the usual highlight of the day, broken apart by Tanjiro and Inosuke's occasional sparring matches. Nezuko, ever the peacekeeper, always told the two to be nicer to each other, but truthfully, Tanjiro was quite entertained. Inosuke and Zenitsu complained about each other often, but it wasn't like they were malicious about it. There was a certain comfort to the idea of a group of people so used and comfortable with each other that they did not bother to filter their words. It reminded Tanjiro of their family, in a way. He supposed this was how it felt to have close friends. He did not really have much of those in the past, so focused he was on providing for their family. It was nice. As promised, Zenitsu let Nezuko in on the whole Tanjiro could not digest human food dilemma. Nezuko got mad that Tanjiro was once again trying to hide his demonic troubles from her, but was pacified when Tanjiro reassured her that he wasn't going to force himself to eat human food any longer. Zenitsu was right. Inosuke didn't seem to notice or mind when Tanjiro skips a meal or signs that he had already eaten. When he did eat with the three of them, he made sure to only eat meat and give away or leave the other food items on his plate. It was a relief to find out that while he couldn't handle rice or vegetables, he could eat meat just fine. He supposed it's because they were similar enough to human flesh. It still made him feel a little weird and settled heavy in his gut, but he did not need to throw it up. That's something, at least. Nezuko had made it her personal pet project to teach Inosuke how to read and write. They did not have anything else to do anyway, so why not? To Inosuke's credit, he was a fast learner, and while his way of thinking was often bizarre and simplistic, he was not slow or dumb at all. He was quite smart, actually. With only a few weeks of Nezuko's education, he was already learning how to read simple sentences and how to write all their names. Inosuke wouldn't admit it, but he seemed to be enjoying the learning process despite being occasionally frustrated by it. He was a good student, Nezuko privately shared with Tanjiro one night. Nezuko was having fun teaching him, too. It was a few days into their 5th week in the manor when Matsuman flew to their location, holding a pretty big package in its claws. Tanjiro was the one who intercepted it, having spent the morning meditating in the Ingawa, while the 3 demon slayers chatted about random stuff inside their room. He took the package with a grateful smile, patting the Kasugai crow's head a little, before standing up and walking inside. Nezuko was the first to notice him, eyes widening curiously. "Oni-chan." Tanjiro smiled and handed the package to her. He signed. Matsuman brought this, and Nezuko nodded, unwrapping the package right then and there. Inside, a black fabric was revealed, as well as a small envelope. Nezuko took the fabric and lifted it out. It was, unsurprisingly, a Demon Slayer uniform. They had been expecting it for a while, given that the Tsuzumi Mansion's demon had ruined Nezuko's old one. They could try to fix it, of course, it was not unsalvageable, but the uniform was made with a special kind of fabric, and there was little point in trying to mend it with ordinary thread. Nezuko folded the uniform and took the envelope curiously. Tanjiro wondered what was inside. Perhaps there was another letter from Kaguya. Nezuko opened it and peeked inside, and as soon as she did, her mouth gaped. Money, Nezuko stuttered. "Hold on, this is a lot of money." "No shit," Inosuke replied, unsurprised. Zenitsu looked confused. Yeah, it's a Demon Slayer's salary. I received mine the other day." "Demon Slayers get salaries?" Nezuko asked, surprised. Tanjiro was surprised as well. He had figured that the Demon Slayer Corps would provide for their Demon Slayers so they'd have money for food and inns. But it did not quite hit him what that meant. "Of course we do. Demon slaying is a job. A very demanding, dangerous job at that. We're basically mercenaries here. Or soldiers, I guess," Zenitsu replied. "If we didn't get some sort of monetary pay, there would be fewer demon slayers. Not everyone is willing to put their lives on the line for revenge or justice, you know. Sometimes people just do it because they can and it's profitable," Zenitsu shrugged. That was such a bleak way of looking at demon slayers, but Tanjiro supposed it made sense. Not everyone had a demon brother who needs a cure. Not everyone had a personal vendetta for the strongest demon of all. Everyone had a different reason for why they took the sword. Even Zenitsu and Inosuke had vastly different reasons for fighting. And if some demon slayers do it for money, could Tanjiro really blame them? "It is a lot of money though. I've never held this much all my life," Nezuko said nervously. "I should save it, shouldn't I?" Or, Tanjiro signed, remembering Nezuko's ruined Haori, "You could go into town. Buy yourself something nice." Something passed Nezuko's face, a small realization. She stared at the money for a long moment, before she eventually nodded, a determined set on her jaw. She suddenly stood up, saying, "I'm going to go to town for a while. I think Hisa-san mentioned one nearby." Tanjiro's eyes widened. He did suggest it, but he didn't expect Nezuko to do it right now. "By yourself," he sighed. "I'll come with." "No, it's all right," Nezuko said with a smile. "I won't take too long, Oni-chan. I'll be home before the sun sets, so don't worry about it." Inosuke, already bored with the conversation, pulled out one of the books they had borrowed from Hisa, mumbling under his breath as he tried to read it. Zenitsu looked back and forth between the siblings, before he eventually offered, "I can come with you if you want, Nezuko-chan." Nezuko shook her head. "I'll be quick, really." And with that, she was off. She seemed to move with a purpose, with a certain resolve, so Tanjiro figured it was best not to stop her. Whatever it was that she wanted to do, he would just let her be and see. He was glad at least that she seemed to take his suggestion of buying something nice for herself though. He wondered what kind of Haori she would pick for herself. Pink suited her, so maybe she should get something with a cherry blossom pattern. Or maybe she would pick their family's trademark checkered pattern. Nothing made Tanjiro happier than seeing his siblings in new, better-fitting clothes. It would have been nice if he was the one who worked to provide them, though. "Hey, Manitsu, how do you read this character?" Inosuke asked. Zenitsu walked over to peek at his book. "Oh, that's easy. You see." By the time the sun set, Nezuko was indeed back. She had a huge smile on her face, signaling a successful trip. As soon as she entered the room, she showed off her haul. She gave a children's book to Inosuke, a small bag of birdseed for Zenitsu's sparrow, and with a huge grin she walked over to her older brother and pulled out an almost familiar blue scarf from her yukata, wrapping it around the demon's neck. Tanjiro blinked, not quite understanding, as he was engulfed with the softness of the fabric. Nezuko giggled at his reaction. I couldn't get something with the exact same color as the one you had, but this'll do, won't it? She asked. I know Onii-chan really liked that other one, but I hope this will suffice. Oh, Tanjiro finally understood. She bought a replacement for the scarf he shredded to bandage her injuries with. Tanjiro smiled at his sister in gratitude, signing a thank you. Nezuko's smile widened. And for me, I bought this. She gleefully pulled out another package from her yukata, showing off what seemed to be a sewing kit with a couple of needles and many spools of different colored threads. Tanjiro tilted his head, confused. Why didn't she buy herself a new Haori? What would she need that sewing kit for? He realized as soon as she walked over to a corner where they put their belongings and pulled out her ruined Haori though. Tanjiro frowned, disapproving. You should have gotten a new one, he sighed. Nezuko blinked and stared at the Haori, as if buying a new one never occurred to her. With a smile, she replied, a new one would never be as special as this one. Tanjiro was confused. Onii-chan made me this Haori, after all. Oh, Nezuko could be so sentimental. Tanjiro sighed, shaking his head in disbelief. Well, whatever makes her happy, he supposed. He promised to himself that one day, when he's back to human and could once again provide for her, he would buy her a beautiful kimono so that she would finally stop wearing this one that she had worn and mended over and over for years. The rips and tears in this kimono turned Haori were pretty big this time, but Nezuko didn't seem to mind. She was already talking about how she's planning to use embroidery to seal the slashes, using some patterns that she's learned from their mother to make the old Haori look prettier. She was planning to work on mending it for the rest of their stay in the manor. She didn't have much else to do, anyway. By the time they were leaving the wisteria house, Nezuko had completely fixed her Haori. There, on her back, was an embroidery of a cherry blossom branch, twigs twisting and splitting off to give way to beautiful cherry blossoms, blooming and flowering in different shades of pink. Nezuko truly did have a talent for embroidery. Tanjiro couldn't help but be proud. And he had to admit, even though he won't say it out loud, it felt good for Nezuko to treasure his meager gift so much. He promised to treasure the scarf she'd given him just as much. The morning they received the mission to go to Mount Natagumo was the same morning that the Dr. Hisa had brought them examined Zenitsu's ribs and Nezuko's back and deemed both of them fully healed. Tanjiro wondered if Matsuman set the timing on purpose, but maybe that was giving too much credit to the Kasugai crow. As they geared up for their next mission, the crow continued to call, north-northeast, north-northeast. Your next mission is north-northeast. The four of you are going to Mount Natagumo. Head to Mount Natagumo. We hear you loud and clear, Matsuman-san, Nezuko assured the crow patiently. It did not stop annoyingly repeating the same lines. Head to Mount Natagumo, north-northeast. Let's eat it, Inosuke decided, poking the bird with his sword. Nezuko yelled an offended hey. On principle, but even she seemed to be relieved when the Kasugai crow finally let them be, flying away to save its life from Inosuke's threats. Inosuke looked smug to see it go. Tanjiro hid a small smile under his muzzle. So we're going on a mission now, huh? I suppose we can't stay in this manner forever, Zenitsu said dejectedly as he wore his Haori. We have to leave anyway. We're already fully healed, and we can't leech off their generosity any longer, Nezuko replied with a shrug. Let's go, everyone. They said their goodbyes to Hisa, thanking her profusely for all the help she had given them. Even in their last moments with each other, Hisa proved to be a kind and thoughtful old lady, as she had even done a purification ceremony for them, striking sparks for good luck in battle. Inosuke had almost attacked her in her attempt, the boar boy not understanding what she was trying to do, but Nezuko was there to quickly explain it to him. In the weeks they had spent together, the boar boy had started to respect Nezuko as something like a teacher, and Nezuko was more than happy to expound on things Inosuke did not understand due to his upbringing. The lesson continued on even after they left, as Inosuke started asking what things like great pride and luck in battle meant, why Hisa was praying for their safety when she had nothing to do with them, etc. etc. Mind you, Inosuke did not word his questions nicely at all. He was actually kind of rude to the old lady. If it was Tanjiro, he probably would have gotten mad and ignored the boar boy for the rest of their trip. But Nezuko was Nezuko, patient and understanding Nezuko, and she did her best to explain all these foreign concepts to Inosuke, even if it was hard. And just like that, they continued onwards to Mount Natagumo, and by the time the mountain was in their view, the sun had already set. Hold up, Zenitsu called out. Would you mind waiting a second? Nezuko, Tanjirou and Inosuke halted on their tracks, turning around only to see Zenitsu sitting down on the ground, cradling his knees close to himself with a very serious look on his face. Zenitsu-san, Nezuko asked, confused. Zenitsu seemed to take that as his cue to wail. I'm scared, okay. Now that we're nearing our destination, I'm so scared. Inosuke placed his hands on his hips judgingly. Why the hell is he sitting? How creepy is that? Who are you to talk, pigface? Don't tell me you're not getting any vibes from that mountain, Zenitsu said as he pointed at Mount Natagumo, looming in the darkness before them. The other three glanced at the mountain behind them, and Tanjiro had to admit that Zenitsu kind of had a point. The mountain itself seemed to beget an aura of doom and malice about it. It's not the kind of place one would want to find themselves in. Unfortunately, that mountain was their destination, their mission, the place where the demons they had to slay reside. Tanjiro understood that Zenitsu was scared, but there was just no way around it. They had to go to Mount Natagumo. I understand that you're scared, but just sitting there won't do us any good, Zenitsu-san. We need to move forward, Nezuko chided. Don't you think I know that? Of course I do. Just give me a moment, okay? I told you he's creepy, Inosuke commented. That's not very nice, Nezuko scolded him. Tanjiro stepped closer towards his friend, crouching in order to go down on his level. He tilted his head questioningly at the scared boy, reaching his hand out as if to say, let's go together. Zenitsu let out more scared wails, clutching at Tanjirou's hand like a lifeline. Tanjirou, I'm not cut out for fighting. I'll die. You'll protect me, won't you? Please protect me, Tanjirou. Tanjiro nodded. He still did not know why Zenitsu had such a bad self-confidence, but if he needed his hand to be held as they walk into such a dangerous place, Tanjiro was more than willing to do the job. He held Zenitsu's hand firmly as he stood and pulled him up along with him, the blonde boy letting out sniffles as he rubbed away the tears in his eyes. Inosuke seemed to be unimpressed. Nezuko looked worried. But when Tanjiro signed, I'll handle Zenitsu, she seemed to finally relax. At least until Tanjiro caught the whiff of it. For just a moment, the sour smell of the demon was so putrid. He immediately turned his head in the direction of it. Oni-chan, what's the matter? Zenitsu asked. Tanjiro ignored the two of them and suddenly ran in the direction of the scent, closer towards the mountain. His companions ran along with him, until they found a fallen demon slayer in the middle of the road, lying injured and crying. The scent of the demon clung to him for some reason, making Tanjiro hesitate, but Nezuko was already running past him, hurrying to help her comrade in need. Are you all right? Nezuko asked in alarm, surveying the man for any injuries. The man let out a grunt. Help me. Something glinted near the man's back, something that looked like strings, and Tanjiro immediately pulled Nezuko close to him as it seemed like the strings turned taut, pulling the fallen demon slayer up in the air. The poor slayer let out a scream, yelling out, they were attached to me, too. Help me. To no avail. It was a disturbing sight to see him get swallowed by the darkness and the foliage of the tall trees, not to be seen again. Zenitsu seemed to think so too, as he was back to gasping in terror, hands on his mouth in horror. Nezuko looked pale, and Inosuke. Well, it was always hard to gauge his emotions, especially while he was wearing his boar mask. The smell of blood wafted in the air. Tanjiro was grateful it was only him who had such a good sense of smell. His companions were spared the knowledge of the poor demon slayer's demise. His hand shook, eventually closing into a fist. They had to slay the demon in this mountain. It was the only way they could stop them from causing more deaths. And never mind. I'm not going there after all. This is too much. I don't wanna. Zenitsu cried out, utterly terrified. Tanjiro felt for him. He was already wary of this mission from the beginning. Seeing this kind of terrible display was surely too much for his weak heart. The blonde boy was back on the ground curled up, shivering in fear. I'll go ahead, Inosuke muttered, walking towards the mountain with a purpose in drawing his swords. You can follow me, shivering. This is making me hungry, Zenitsu whined. This is challenging enough for you, right? Inosuke let out a war cry. Let's go. And with that, he started running towards the mountain. Wait, Inosuke-san. It's too dangerous to go on your own. Inosuke-san. Nezuko called after him, worried, but the boar boy wasn't letting anything or anyone stop him. Nezuko turned to Tanjiro, unsure on what to do. Should they follow Inosuke, who had continued on ahead, or stay and try to coax Zenitsu into getting over his fear so they could all go together? Tanjiro crouched down to Zenitsu's level, pulling at Zenitsu's Haori with aggressive MMPHs. While he understood that the blonde truly was terrified, it was no excuse to not go through with the mission at all, and he called himself a demon slayer. Unfortunately, Zenitsu was not budging, shaking his head profusely. begging to be spared. Tanjiro looked up at Nezuko helplessly. Nezuko's hand was on the hilt of her sword, her expression anxious. She kept looking back to the path Inosuke had taken, eager to follow after him. Tanjiro was not surprised. Nezuko had developed quite a mentor-like relationship with the boar boy, with the way that she had seemed to take it upon herself to teach him the things his upbringing did not allow him to know. She was younger than Inosuke, but she felt a little bit responsible for him. Tanjiro sighed, coming up with a decision on their current dilemma. Go ahead, he signed, with no little hesitation. He did not like the idea of the two of them getting separated, as a repeat of the Nezuko's injuries on the last mission was very much unwelcome. But Tanjiro had gotten quite close with Inosuke and Zenitsu in their long stay in the Wisteria house, and he liked the idea of leaving them on their own even less. Kaguya sent the four of them to this mountain for a reason. Either there were multiple demons in this mountain, like the case with their last mission, or the demon was crazy powerful, and they were all expected to work together to defeat them. It would be foolish, not to mention dangerous, to venture up the mountain on your own. Zenitsu and I will follow after you, he continued. Are you sure? Nezuko asked, worried. Tanjiro nodded. I'll find you. I'll follow your scent. Nezuko nodded. All right. Be careful, Oni-chan. You too. And with that, Nezuko ran forward, following the path Inosuke had taken. Tanjiro looked back to Zenitsu, who was still wheezing from the intensity of his crying and wailing. Tanjiro waited for him to stop and regain some of his composure, before he tugged once again on his sleeves and tapped his own temple twice, a sign the two of them had made to let Zenitsu know that he had something to say, and wanted the blonde boy to listen to his thoughts. Tanjiro tried, but Zenitsu wasn't listening. Zenitsu. He tried again, tapping his temples with more fervor. Thankfully, the blonde seemed to finally notice it. Staring at Tanjiro with tears in his amber eyes, Zenitsu stuttered, Tanjiro. Tanjiro sighed, staring back at Zenitsu with a concerned gaze. He met his eyes evenly, not angry, nor judgmental or disappointed. Just a kind, gentle expression, filled with genuine compassion. Zenitsu seemed to relax at the sight of it, his shoulders untensing. Zenitsu, Tanjiro softly chided, once he was sure that the blonde was now listening to him. You're acting very uncool right now, you know. You say that as if I've ever acted cool. Zenitsu replied in a self-deprecating manner, rubbing his damp eyes with the sleeve of his heroism. Of course you do, Tanjiro replied without hesitation. When you threw yourself in front of me and the kids when Inosuke accused me of being a demon. When you told me you knew my secret and asked if Nezuko did, too, I think you were pretty cool back then, you know. Zenitsu raised his head, looking at Tanjiro doubtfully. Tanjiro sighed. I know you're afraid, but isn't it about time to man up and face the life you've chosen? I didn't choose this life, you know. Zenitsu counterpointed. Jai-chan forced me to. You have no idea how many times I wanted to give up, how many times I've tried to run. He always kept stopping me and dragging me back. Jai-chan didn't force you to become a demon slayer, not really, Tanjiro replied thoughtfully. I mean, you've mentioned that he forced you to train, but you could have escaped him the day of the final selection. He would have just assumed you've died in the test if he didn't hear from you afterward. But you didn't. You still took the test and became a demon slayer, despite everything. Tanjiro leaned closer and nudged Zenitsu gently, a knowing look on his red eyes. Even though you're afraid, even though you're terrified. Why? What made you want to push through? Zenitsu stared at the ground for a long time. Tanjiro patiently waited. Finally, Zenitsu mumbled, make him proud. MMPH. Tanjiro tilted his head, not quite understanding. Zenitsu looked away, flushing scarlet. I wanted to make Jai-chan proud, okay. I wanted to be someone who deserved to be his student. I don't want the time he invested in me to go to waste. I want to be stronger, and stand on equal footing with Kaigaku Aniki, and become someone I don't hate. Zenitsu's hands clutched at his black pants, bunching up a bunch of fabric. But it's not easy, okay. It's not easy. I'm weak and cowardly and pathetic. I'm not brave like you or Inosuke or Nezuko-chan. So. He let out a deep sigh, sounding utterly defeated. Just leave me here, Tanjiro. You want to be with Nezuko-chan, don't you? Just leave me be. Don't you want to protect Nezuko with me? Tanjiro tried. Zenitsu laughed humorlessly. Nezuko-chan can take care of herself. She's way stronger than me. She doesn't need someone like me. It's not like I managed to protect her back in the mansion. Anyway, I'm useless. Silence. Tanjiro stared at Zenitsu for a long moment, frustration creeping up his chest as he tried to think of a way to rouse Zenitsu to where they ought to go. He didn't like this part of Zenitsu, the cowardly, self-deprecating Zenitsu who didn't trust in his own strength, who didn't trust in the hours he spent training his body to become a demon-slaying weapon. Tanjiro's nose told him that Zenitsu was strong, really strong, which only made the frustration worse because the blonde seemed to be unable to see it, to recognize his own hard work. Tanjiro grabbed Zenitsu by the shoulders, determination in his crimson eyes as he stared the blonde boy down with a stern gaze. "Listen to me, Zenitsu," he started, his inner voice firm in a way that suggested he wasn't going to take no for an answer. Bravery doesn't mean the lack of fear. It means feeling the fear, recognizing it, and running towards it anyway. Zenitsu seemed to be under the impression that the rest of their group were never afraid. That was simply not true. He didn't know about Inosuke, but Tanjiro in particular, he had a lot of things he was afraid of. He was afraid of losing his sister, afraid of losing his humanity. He was afraid of demons too, to a degree. They were strong and malicious and had a very good chance of taking away the person he treasured most, Nezuko, his only remaining family. That didn't mean he was going to give up on fighting them, though. That didn't mean he was going to cower. They had people to help, people to protect. As part of the Demon Slayer Corps, it was their responsibility. Zenitsu needed to stop listening to the voice of fear inside him. Instead, he should start paying attention to the part of himself who wanted to make his mentor proud, who wanted to protect Nezuko, who wanted to become the person he had always wanted to be. Tanjiro's grip tightened against the blonde boy's shoulders, crimson eyes meeting amber, and Tanjiro continued in a very serious tone. "Zenitsu, you can be brave too. I believe in you." Zenitsu sniffled, unsure. I don't. You can be brave too." Tanjiro insisted. "I believe in you. I don't think. You just have to do it, one step at a time." Tanjiro stood up, putting his left hand on his hip, his right hand reaching out, urging the blonde boy to take his hand and stand up with him. "I know you can do it." Zenitsu didn't budge. He still looked miserable. "Tanjiro, I know you can do it," Tanjiro insisted, waving his outstretched hand in front of the blonde boy's face. Zenitsu hesitated, but Tanjiro kept waving his hand. Eventually, the blonde boy's expression softened. He reluctantly took the demon's hand, standing up and dusting off his pants and haori. He looked up at the mountain fearfully, uncertain. I don't know, Tanjiro. That mountain. It's really creepy. I'll be with you every step of the way," Tanjiro reassured. He didn't let go of Zenitsu's hand, instead tightening his hold on it. Zenitsu let out a squeak but did not protest. Instead, he smelled comforted. They started walking towards the mountain. "Why, you won't leave me, right, Tanjiro?" Zenitsu whispered. "Yeah, you'll protect me, won't you?" "Of course, Nezuko-chan." "Inosuke," Zenitsu called out, cupping his mouth with his hand so that his voice could resonate. Tanjiro followed after him, looking around anxiously, trying to sniff his way back to his little sister, to no avail. It seemed he had overestimated his abilities this time. He had thought that he would have no problem locating Nezuko and Inosuke with his sense of smell. But up in the mountain, the sour scent of the demons were getting in the way, overpowering his sensitive nose. Every few minutes the wind would change, bringing along new, different smells along with it, heavy and cloying and generally unpleasant. There had to be at least 5 demons in this mountain, and that did not bode well. Tanjiro wanted to find his sister as soon as possible. "I'm sorry, Tanjiro," Zenitsu said, sounding very much ashamed. "If I wasn't such a wimp, we wouldn't have gotten separated." While that was true in a way, Tanjiro would not let his friend down talk himself once again. He waved his hand in dismissal. "It's alright. Inosuke shouldn't have ventured out on his own anyway. But, let's just focus on finding them, okay? Can you hear them anywhere?" Zenitsu closed his eyes, his eyebrows wrinkling as he tried that. In the end, he sighed. "I can't. I keep hearing all these little, clicking noises, like bugs scattering on the ground." He looked around, noting the way that most of the trees in the area were covered with a lot of thin, wispy webs. "It must be spiders, right? I don't know why, but this mountain seems full of them. That's not normal, right?" he asked anxiously. Tanjiro remembered what he saw of the demon slayer they met at the foot of the mountain. The nearly transparent strings on his back that went taut. They looked too much like a spider's thread. He shook his head. Definitely not normal. From a distance, a couple of crows took flight, creating a sudden loud noise. Zenitsu let out an eek and gasped, immediately clinging to Tanjiro. Tanjiro let him. It was obvious that the mountain still creeped the blonde boy out, but having Tanjiro around seemed to reassure him. The demon was happy to be of any help. Zenitsu was quite high-strung, but he wasn't unpleasant company. "Bee birds," Zenitsu stuttered. Tanjiro gave him a moment, and eventually the blonde boy cleared his throat and let go, looking a bit embarrassed. "What was that? You know, this is starting to make me mad. We better find Inosuke and Nezuko-chan soon, so we can kiss this creepy mountain goodbye. And then, so long, scary forest." We still have to defeat the demons, but that's the spirit, Tanjiro replied, unable to keep himself from patting the blonde boy's head. He felt quite proud of him for pushing himself. Tanjiro felt like an older brother watching a younger sibling grow, even though Zenitsu was older than him by a year. Zenitsu flushed scarlet once again, seemingly embarrassed, before he swatted Tanjiro's hands off, painfully reminding the demon boy of his little brother, Takeo. He didn't like being patted on the head, either. Tanjiro smiled sadly. They walked further into the forest. Nezuko-chan, Inosuke. Zenitsu continued yelling. This isn't working. We'll never find them like this, he eventually said after a few more minutes of wandering around. I have an idea, Tanjiro started. If we head towards the demons, maybe we'll run into them. Zenitsu screeched in protest. You want to head towards the demons? Are you insane? Instead of wandering aimlessly, we better start fighting and making sure Inosuke and Nezuko have one less demon to worry about. Don't you think? Tanjiro reasoned. I'm worried for Nezuko, yes, but we went to this mountain for a reason. I suppose you're right. I don't really want to go looking for trouble, but Zenitsu hesitated. Tanjiro gave him a serious look. Zenitsu sighed. Okay, I get it. I'm a demon slayer, this is the life I chose, blah blah blah. I have your back, Tanjiro promised, before he pointed in the direction of a smell that's been bothering him since they walked into this mountain. Something really stinks that way. Let's go. You're still insane, Zenitsu replied, before unsheathing his sword halfway from its scabbard and popping it back, seemingly in a nervous gesture. Tanjiro had just enough time to see the beautiful golden blade shine in the moonlight, the lightning pattern catching his eye, before the blade was back in its sheath. His crimson eyes widened. Your sword is beautiful, Tanjiro commented. It was the first time he had seen it. You're just trying to butter me up before you throw me to the demons, Zenitsu grumbled. No, seriously, it is, Tanjiro said with a smile as they walked towards the direction he had pointed. It's just as beautiful as your soul, as beautiful as you are as a person, Zenitsu. Zenitsu blushed for the nth time that night. At this point, Tanjiro was enjoying turning him red. Don't you get embarrassed of the things you say. Technically, I am not saying it, Tanjiro replied cheekily. They spent the trip towards the demon just like that, with Tanjiro distracting Zenitsu from his crippling fear. It seemed to be working, with the way Zenitsu was replying to their banter, even as they got closer and closer to their destination. The scent of the demon got stronger and stronger. At one point, Tanjiro figured it was prudent to unsheath his katana fully. Zenitsu looked alarmed by this action, stuttering, Are we getting close? Yes, Tanjiro confirmed. It was then that he felt a pinprick right on his thumb, on the hand that wasn't holding his sword. Tanjiro winced, curiously looking down at it. He was just able to make out the small body of a white spider before it all but skittered away. A spider bite. He frowned at his thumb, tilting it up to the moonlight. He could not even see the bite itself, it was so small, but something about it gave him a pause. Ever since Tanjiro had been turned into a demon, he could feel his body processes more easily. Like the way he could tell that sleeping was changing something in his body 2 years ago. Like the way he could tell his body was mending his broken bones while he was fighting the arrow demon weeks ago. And at the moment, he could sense it, the cells on his thumb scrambling to repair itself, in ways that did not match with a mere spider bite. It made him worry. Better safe than sorry, really. With an air of nonchalance that made Zenitsu gasp, Tanjiro lifted his sword and lopped off the tip of his bitten thumb, wincing at the pain as his dismembered flesh fell onto the grassy ground. Zenitsu screeched in alarm, but Tanjiro was not concerned, the bleeding stopping immediately thanks to his demonic nature. It took some time, but by the time Zenitsu had stopped having a panic attack over his self-inflicted injury, Tanjiro's thumb had already grown back. Good as new. Thankfully, whatever the spider bite did to his finger did not linger. What was that? Zenitsu demanded. Be careful. I think the spiders are poisonous, Tanjiro warned. No, I don't care about that. What the hell was that? Tanjiro frowned and gave the blonde a confused expression. I told you. The spiders were poisonous. It bit my thumb. So you decide to just cut it off just like that. You are insane. I'm a demon, Tanjiro replied cluelessly. I heal quickly. That doesn't mean you should just chop off limbs and fingers without any preamble. Have you no sense of self-preservation? Didn't it hurt? Don't you dare do something like that in front of Nezuko-chan. I tell you, she'll be so worried. God, you are hopeless, you. Tanjiro stared at his thumb pensively. It did hurt, but only for a few moments. In a rational way, he understood why Zenitsu was freaking out about what he had done. He supposed it could be quite disturbing to humans, those who could not regrow appendages, those who heal so slowly. But Tanjiro was a demon with a demon body, and while he may have a human mind and human emotions, Sometimes it was just more practical to let his body get injured as a means to an end, especially when it would not take him long at all to recover. It was just like that time when he let the arrow demon twist his arm into oblivion, or the time he let Inosuke beat him up. He would heal anyway, so he didn't mind. Should he have? Suddenly, Tanjiro was very uncomfortable. He was coming to realize that when it came to bodily injuries, he had started to think in a very demon-like way. But that didn't mean anything. It was inevitable that he was going to get used to his demon body with the 2 years he had spent living in it. Tanjiro must not let himself get too used to it though. Even at this very moment, a medicine was being created to turn him back into a human. He won't have this resilient, demon body forever, not like he wanted it anyway. I'm sorry, Zenitsu, he told the blonde boy with an uneasy smile. I won't do it again. You better not, Zenitsu retorted, folding his arms in front of his chest. It's so creepy, and I get that you're a demon, but he abruptly stopped, rubbing his ear as he turned his head to look behind him. What the hell is up with that? Little creepy spiders making noise with all their spider legs, skittering and skittering over and over, so annoying. There was a big spider with a human head staring up at them. Zenitsu screeched, is this even possible? No. Blinking down at the spider, Tanjiro moved to walk closer. Zenitsu would not have it, hiding behind him and tugging at his heroism as he continued to shriek and babble. That's a spider with a human face. That's a spider with a human face. What's up with that? What's up with that? Please be a dream. Please be a dream. Please be a dream. Be quiet, Tanjiro softly scolded. But Zenitsu wasn't having it. If this can just be a dream, I promise to do my best. If I wake up to find myself resting my head in Nezuko-chan's lap. Tanjiro slapped Zenitsu upside the head with an unimpressed stare. There was no reason for the blonde to continue to panic and even bring Nezuko's name in yet another one of his famous panic attacks. The spider wasn't even doing anything but just standing there, staring at them with a strangely blank, empty gaze. Having spent 2 years mute, Tanjiro liked to think he had come to understand voiceless creatures better, however strange they were. And this spider was definitely strange, but so far it had not shown the desire to bring them any harm. With Zenitsu finally calming down, albeit still gasping for air, Tanjiro knelt down to the spider's level. Zenitsu let out a squeak. What are you doing, Tanjiro? Tanjiro did not reply. He merely held out his hand to the spider, urging it to come closer. The spider blinked and seemed to hesitate, before it turned on its heel and scampered away. Tanjiro followed it with his eyes and saw how it stopped a certain distance from them, glanced back, and then continued on its way. It left, Zenitsu murmured. I think it wants us to follow it, Tanjiro replied, standing up. It's going in the direction of the demon's scent. Let's go, Zenitsu. You're gonna trust a little spider baby abomination like that? Zenitsu asked incredulously. It didn't seem to be violent or malicious, and I'm sure there's a reason why something like it exists. It could be related to a blood demon art, don't you think? Tanjiro replied, getting impatient. He tugged at Zenitsu's heroism. Let's go, before we lose it. Okay, fine, Zenitsu replied, although he still looked quite pale. I hope we're not walking into our deaths. And so, they followed. Just as Tanjiro had thought, it really did seem like the spider wanted them to follow it. It kept stopping every now and then and glancing behind at them, before continuing on its way. Aware of their poison, the two swatted the spiders trying to get a bite on them. As they got closer to their destination, Tanjiro's hands tightened on the grip of his blade. The more they walked, the more the scent of the demon got stronger, stinking to high heaven. Tanjiro's eyes were watering with the intensity of the smell, overloading his already sensitive nose. Zenitsu kept complaining about it, too. Tanjiro wondered where all the stink was coming from. Demons usually smelled bad, sure, but they never smelled this bad. It was so bad it was making his throat ache, so bad he almost felt like he couldn't breathe. But it was not like Tanjiro was not used to discomfort. He started breathing through his mouth, soldiering on. Soon enough, they arrived at their destination. Tanjiro was the first to see it. It was a clearing, the whole area illuminated by the light of the full moon. Thin, delicate lines of spider webs crisscrossed above, holding what looked like a small house up in the air like it weighed nothing, along with bodies of humans that seemed to be in the middle of an arachnid transformation. It was disturbing. What was more disturbing was the realization that the spider baby they had been following must be a completed version of that very same transformation, meaning that the human-headed spider was once human. But how did they turn out that way? The answer was there as soon as Tanjiro noted the purplish marks along the bodies of those yet to be completely transformed. Some kind of poison. He remembered the poisonous spider bite he had encountered earlier, and was suddenly glad he managed to warn Zenitsu about that. He wasn't too worried about himself on that front. He was a demon after all, and it's unlikely that a transformative poison would work well with him and his regenerative capabilities. But Zenitsu was human and vulnerable. This demon could prove to be mighty dangerous. Zenitsu gasped at the sight, his hands flying to his mouth to cover his mouth. They were shaking. Tanjirou, he whispered, uncertain. Those people. Something twitched in Tanjirou's peripheral vision. The demon boy moved before he could even really process it. The attack came from the side where Zenitsu was, and so he found himself elbowing Zenitsu out of the way, just in time for a purple, viscous liquid to get sprayed right where the blonde boy was standing. Zenitsu yelped as he hit the ground on his backside. Tanjirou hissed in pain through his muzzle. The majority of the liquid fell on the ground, but a substantial amount of it hit Tanjirou's left arm, the liquid eating through his clothes and sinking into his skin. For a moment he couldn't process anything other than it hurts, it burns, it hurts, it burns, and distantly he heard someone cackling, laughing, delighting in his pain. Tanjirou blinked the spots out of his vision as he tried to focus, the stranger's voice dripping with sadism as it rejoiced in his suffering. Good try, good try. I almost got Blondie there too. No matter, you'll both be dying here anyways. Tanjirou stared at his smoking, injured arm. I need to be careful too. Looking back, it was careless to think that the enemy had only one kind of poison. This one on his arm seems to be more like an acid-like kind of poison, and even now he could feel it burning into his flesh. He gritted his teeth as he turned his head to look where the voice came from, and as soon as he did his eyes widened. He had never seen a demon so deformed and monstrous in his life. He looked like an enormous spider with a human head, not unlike the spider demon baby they had followed to this location. He was hanging upside down by a thread from one of the branches, continuing on his taunting, especially towards Zenitsu, who was gaping and cowering. Or you could be part of my army. What do you say? It will be less painful than getting burned alive by my own poison. That's for sure. Just 30 minutes and you will be owl better. Tanjirou glanced at the people hanging from the threads in the clearing behind them, then at the clump of spider demon babies scampering on the ground below, with those eerily blank looks in their eyes. None of them looked remotely close to all better. This demon had done this. This demon had caused all these suffering. Tanjirou tightened his grip on his sword. There was no time to lose. He took a deep breath. Hinakami Kagura. First form, he started. Dance. Hinakami Kagura. First form, he started. Dance. Even before Tanjirou finished the movement, he knew it wasn't going to connect. The demon had already noticed him moving from the corner of his eye, swinging his large body on the delicate thread, effortlessly evading the arc of Tanjirou's blade that would have severed his neck. He was incredibly fast, cackling madly as he moved, before closing his mouth and puffing his cheeks, a sign that Tanjirou immediately interpreted as him preparing another spray of burning poison. Instinctively, Tanjirou lifted his hands to shield his face from the worst of it, but then there was a sudden crack in the air, his nose picking up the barest hint of ozone, and the next thing he knew he was moving, flying, no, being carried over Zenitsu's shoulder like a sack of potatoes, the ground rushing underneath them. So fast, Tanjirou was amazed. The effect was only dampened with Zenitsu's mumbles under his breath, frantic, terrified. What the hell is that? Spider demon monster. No, 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 I can't. Gotta run, gotta run, gotta run. Zenitsu. Tanjirou's thoughts yelled out, as soon as he realized that Zenitsu was not only evading the attack, but actually completely running away with him in tow, the blonde boy's fear once again getting the best of him. The clearing from where the spider demon was situated was now a mere speck in the distance, and Tanjirou could not just let this pass. Zenitsu was a demon slayer, and Tanjirou was as good as, it was simply graceless to run away from a fight. Urokodaki raised him better than that. Zenitsu, put me down. No, I don't want to. Didn't you see that demon in there? It's scary as shit. Let's just run away, Tanjirou. Please, please, please. No, Tanjirou insisted. Didn't you see what he did to those demon slayers there? If we run away now, he'll only hurt more people. He has to be stopped. But, Zenitsu, Tanjirou could smell his own simmering anger emanating from him, and Zenitsu must hear it too. With a whimper, the blonde boy tilted his feet to skid through the dirt, using it as a brake to halt their movement. He set Tanjirou down on the ground, unable to meet his eyes as he clenched his fists, fear and frustration and shame emanating from him, culminating into a scent that smelled like decaying, rotting peaches. Tanjirou wrinkled his nose as he brushed some stray spiderwebs off his clothes. These little threads were everywhere. You're mad, Zenitsu murmured in a small voice. When Tanjirou replied, his inner voice sounded harsh, disappointed. That cowardly side of you is one I can't help but dislike. Then you're really going to fight that monster, aren't you? You're really going to do it, aren't you? Ideally, that would be we, Tanjirou replied, wincing as he surveyed his injured arm. It had stopped smoking, but the burns still stung, and his body was having a bit of trouble healing it, perhaps because it's connected to a blood demon art. Tanjirou was sure he would be able to recover with a little bit of blood to help him along. But then, Zenitsu stared at his arm and paled, stuttering awkwardly. Why isn't it healing yet? Do you need to drink blood? I probably do, but I'm saving that in case I get a more dire injury, Tanjirou shrugged. I only have one vial with me, after all. Then, should I give you some of mine? If it's Tanjirou, I don't mind. Zenitsu trailed off. Tanjirou's eyes widened, staring at the blonde with surprise. With how averse Zenitsu was to demons, you'd think basically being a meal to one would bother him immensely. He did say that Tanjirou sounded like kindness, and perhaps that puts Zenitsu at ease, enough to not be too bothered by what he just offered to do. Perhaps Tanjirou's unique sound helps Zenitsu separate him from the demons the blonde boy was so scared of. Or perhaps his sound did not matter at all, and Zenitsu would offer to do such favors for his friend, no matter their circumstance. Tanjirou felt his irritation and anger subside. How could he not, when Zenitsu was being so openly considerate? I'll be fine. The pain isn't unmanageable, Tanjirou replied. He hesitated, before continuing, as much as your cowardly side frustrates me, your caring side is something I like very much. Thank you for your concern, Zenitsu. I appreciate it. Zenitsu let out a small strangled sound, apparently not expecting that compliment, so soon after Tanjirou's anger. Why, you're welcome. The demon boy nodded and tightened his grip on his sword as he took a few steps forward, looking at Zenitsu over his shoulder. I'm going to go back. You can stay here if you want, but I know you won't do that. A smile ghosted on the corner of his lips. You could have run away on your own, but instead you carried me with you to safety. That goes to show how much you care about your friends. If I'm going to battle, you're going to help me anyway, won't you? And just like that, without waiting for the blonde to respond, Tanjirou ran ahead, back in the direction they had come from. Back to the demon's nest. He couldn't help the smile that emerged fully on his lips when he heard Zenitsu yelp before following him. When the blonde spoke, his voice was still wary, still riddled with fear and insecurity. I, Zenitsu started. I'm weak, you know. I don't want to be a hindrance to you. On the contrary, Tanjirou replied, glancing back at Zenitsu. You're fast. Crazy fast. Faster than even me or Inosuke or Nezuko. S-speed is a foundation of the thunder-breathing technique, Zenitsu explained. It focuses on channeling strength into the user's legs, maximizing the output and power of your muscles. The idea is to defeat the opponent in one insanely quick strike. Then, if I can give you an opening, could you slice the demon's neck with your sword? You'd let me do something so important. What if I mess up? You won't, Tanjirou replied with complete and utter confidence. I trust you. Tanjirou could smell the moment the fear and trepidation swirling around Zenitsu turned into pride and determination. There was happiness there too, almost like he was overjoyed to be trusted by Tanjirou. Clearly, since he couldn't trust his own abilities, he needed someone to trust them for him. Tanjirou thought he figured out what made the blonde boy tick. The nest was up ahead, much visible now. Tanjirou could see the demon dangling down the floating house, spidery legs twitching as he looked around warily. Tanjirou glanced back at Zenitsu again, crimson eyes widening when he saw the blonde boy halting in his tracks and taking a stance, shaking hands settling on the hilt of the blade on his hip, pulling back his left leg in preparation for a quick dash. When he spoke it was in a whisper, his voice shaky and unsure, as if he wasn't sure if he deserved to utter such words. Thunder breathing. First form, Zenitsu hesitated, but only for a second, before he continued. Thunderclap and flash. It was like lightning. Tanjirou could not think of any other word to describe it. One moment, Zenitsu was there behind him, and the next he was flashing towards the demon at incredible speeds, so fast that Tanjirou could barely see him. Being carried by Zenitsu as he ran was one thing, but seeing his technique from an outsider's perspective was something else. If Tanjirou did not have a muzzle on his mouth, it would be gaping with surprise and amazement. Zenitsu reached the demon's nest first, unsheathing his blade in a split second as he tried to sever the demon's neck. The demon noticed him in the last second though, and unleashed another spray of his acid-like poison, which Zenitsu somehow evaded in mid-air to Tanjirou's wonder. The evasion seemed to make him lose his sense of balance though, as he fell gracelessly to the ground, letting out an oomph as he hit the rocky earth. I knew you two are coming back. Demon slayers always do, the demon purred, but it was obvious with the way his eyes darted between Zenitsu and the approaching Tanjirou that he was now more cautious of the two of them, unlike before where it seemed like he was looking down on them. He gave Zenitsu a look of distaste, calling out to his army of spider babies, "Hey, you guys, pounce on him." The little critters scrambled in attention, skittering towards the fallen Zenitsu. Tanjiro was not about to let that happen, not on his watch. He ran faster, intercepting the spider demon babies before they could reach his friend. He took a deep breath. In a Kami Kagura, he twisted his blade so that he was using the blunt edge rather than the sharp one, just to make sure he was not hurting any of them, any more than necessary. They were victims too. There has to be a way to save them, a way to turn them back. Third form, Raging Sun. The spider babies jumped toward them, but Tanjiro was prepared. With each strike he managed to fend them off one by one, sending the creatures flying off in different directions without injuring any of them. Behind them, he can hear Zenitsu scrambling to get up, saying uncertainty, "Tanjiro, stay alert." Tanjiro replied, as he kicked a spider baby out of the way, looking up at the spider demon who was cackling at their display. The spider demon puffed his cheek once again, and Zenitsu let out a yell before pushing the two of them out of the way, the purple poison sizzling on the ground they were standing on. "Pierce them, inject them with poison. Don't let them breathe," the spider demon commanded. The spider babies were more than eager to comply, opening their mouths as disgusting tongues with sharp, needle-like tips emerged from their faces. Zenitsu let out a loud screech as he and Tanjiro evaded, one spider baby at a time, ducking and dodging and jumping and sidestepping their attacks. Fear was once again prominent in Zenitsu's scent, and he was near hyperventilating. Tanjiro was worried for his friend, but he was not in the position to calm him right now. He just hoped he was going to be okay. 4 spider babies jumped in front of them, tongues lashing out towards them, dripping with poison. Tanjiro jumped in front of Zenitsu again and moved his blade in a way that would have cut all those nasty tongues. But since he was still using the blunt edge of his katana, it merely brushed them aside. He looked behind him, looked at Zenitsu who was pale and shaking with terror, hoping his inner voice was enough to snap him out of it. "Zenitsu," he called out. The spider demon above them was laughing, enjoying the show. Attack. Thankfully, it seemed to snap him from his stupor. Shaking hands once again grabbed at the hilt of his blade as he assumed the same, earlier stance. Thunder breathing. First form. Tanjiro blinked in surprise. He was going to use the same move. Not so fast. The spider demon bellowed, sending another spray of poison Zenitsu's way. Zenitsu shrieked and dodged. Tears were freely streaming down his face as he assumed the same stance all over again. Thunder breathing. First form. A spider baby tried to pounce on Zenitsu before he even finished his move. Zenitsu sidestepped and evaded the creature smoothly, but now that the spider demon knew he was going to attack, it seemed that the spider babies were being more aggressive towards him. As Zenitsu eluded another couple of frontal assaults, Tanjiro saw an entire clump of spider babies regrouping behind him, waiting for their chance to strike. Hinakami Kagura, 6th form. Tanjiro bolted behind Zenitsu, their backs touching as he moved his sword. Burning Bones, Summer Sun. Tanjiro's blade moved in a circular slash, defending both himself and Zenitsu. The spider babies that received his attack all got thrown off in different directions. A scent of gratefulness emerged from Zenitsu, followed by a hopelessness that made Tanjiro's heart hurt. It was obvious that Zenitsu was discouraged by his ineffective attacks. The hopelessness only increased tenfold when they heard the spider demon laughing. "You keep assuming the same stance over and over. No question about it, you're only capable of one attack, aren't you, Blondie?" Tanjiro's eyes widened. "What? You can't defeat me with that alone. You know, your friend here could defend you from my little army over and over again if he wants. But there is no point if you can't even cut me. You're just a predictable, spineless coward. So why not give up now?" Zenitsu shuddered. Aye, don't listen to him," Tanjiro warned. "Just let yourselves be poisoned and be a part of us," the demon once again tempted. "It's a better alternative than dying." The scent of fear was once again coming off of Zenitsu in waves, so strong that for a moment Tanjiro was worried the blonde was actually going to pass out. Decaying, rotting peaches, it almost smelled worse than the pungent scent coming off of the spider demon himself, if only because it was coming off of his precious friend. But then there was a spark, a sudden spike of indignance, of righteous anger. Suddenly, the scent of rotting peaches gave way to the scent of a burgeoning thunderstorm. "I don't have to listen to the likes of you," Zenitsu exclaimed. He assumed his stance once again, but something about this was different. This time Zenitsu's hands weren't shaking, his amber eyes intent on his target as he spoke. Thunder breathing. First form. The spider demon cackled. "Do you really think you can beat me?" Thunderclap and flash, sixfold. The air was vibrating. Tanjiro thought he heard the sound of clapping thunder, but he wasn't sure. He was too stunned, too mesmerized as he watched the next moments unfold. In response to Zenitsu's attack, the spider demon puffed his cheeks to spray his poison once again. But in the next split second, Zenitsu vanished. No, he didn't vanish, he moved, so fast, like lightning, side by side, from tree to tree, so fast that even Tanjiro could not follow him with his sight, merely seeing the afterimages of his movement. The demon tried to send another spray of poison after him to no avail. He tried to send more of his spider babies after him to no avail. 6 times. Zenitsu jumped 6 times in different directions, evading every one of the spider demon's counterattacks, using the spider threads to move swiftly up towards where the spider demon was. The sound of a blade slicing through flesh, the sound of the demon screaming in pain, the sound of a head hitting the ground below. Zenitsu was in the air, with the brilliant moon as his backdrop, and Tanjiro could not help but gasp in awe at the picture he had made there. At that moment, merely a few seconds that felt like hours, Zenitsu was strong, Zenitsu was invincible, Zenitsu was so cool. Zenitsu fell on top of the floating house with a loud thud, groaning in pain. Worried for his friend, Tanjiro immediately ran up the tree, jumping on delicate threads before landing on the surface of the house where the blonde boy was. Distantly, he heard the spider demon's last words, ranting in disbelief over the sudden turn of events. But he ignored him in favor of making sure Zenitsu was alright. He already knew Zenitsu was successful. The thick, putrid scent of the spider demon was now being replaced by the scent of ash, the scent that Tanjiro had come to associate with death to the demons they slay. The battle was over, at least for now. Zenitsu, are you alright? Tanjiro asked, rushing over to the blonde boy's side. He was laying down with his arms over his eyes, breathing slow and even. As soon as Tanjiro kneeled beside him, he shifted his arms, Amber staring up into the sky with something akin to disbelief. Did I really do it? Did I really do that, Tanjiro? Defeat a scary demon? Me? Tanjiro's expression softened, smiling at the blonde. I told you could do it. You told me, yeah. You believed in me. I guess I never really did believe in myself. Zenitsu closed his eyes, processing that for a long moment. Thank you, Tanjiro. Tanjiro's smile widened. Anyway, Zenitsu bolted up, standing and stretching his limbs. Tanjiro stood up too and pretended not to see Zenitsu stealthily rubbing unshed tears against the sleeve of his heroism. The boy had just battled his own personal demons and won. He had the right to be a little bit emotional. When he spoke next, he sounded less solemn, more like himself. We still have to find Inosuke and Nezuko-chan. Are you injured anywhere? Tanjiro just wanted to make sure. Nope, I'm good as new. Zenitsu replied with a huge grin. There was a certain confidence about him that weren't there earlier, before the conclusion of the fight. Tanjiro decided that was a good thing. I'm a bit tired, though. How about you? Tanjiro nodded at his injured arm. Perhaps it was because the spider demon was dead, but it seemed that it was healing at a much faster rate now. In a few minutes, the burns would be completely gone. It was a good call that he did not consume his vial of blood yet, it would have been such a waste. Zenitsu looked relieved. Then, Nezuko-chan. Zenitsu looked around them anxiously, taking advantage of their high vantage point to survey the forest below. You said earlier that there were 5 demons in this mountain, right? Should we go look for the others, too? Where do you think we should head next? Tanjiro stared at the forest as well. Now that the spider demon was dead, the overwhelming stink of the area was dissipating, allowing Tanjiro to make use of his sense of smell once again. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and took a deep breath. Up here, the wind was much stronger, bringing him scents he could not smell on ground level. He tracked the scent of the remaining demons one by one. There was one in the west, another not too far from the first, and another one in the eastern part of the mountain. Tanjiro frowned. There were only 3 remaining. Nezuko and Inosuke must have already dispatched one of them. Then, Tanjiro took a deep breath again. Instead of focusing on the scent of the demons, he instead focused on the scent of ash. There was the stronger scent underneath them, of course, but there is also another fainter one, not too terribly far from where they were. Tanjiro's heart rate picked up as he realized he may have just figured out where the other half of their quartet were. The scent smelled recent, so they must still be in that location. I know where they are, Tanjiro exclaimed, jumping down the house without waiting for Zenitsu. After seeing how fast the blonde boy could get, he was not worried about accidentally leaving him behind. As expected, Zenitsu followed after him without any problem, as they raced past tree after tree, following the scent eagerly. Soon enough they arrived in a clearing, one with a big rock in the middle, perhaps another demon's nest. Tanjiro could not bring himself to care though. He immediately launched himself towards a familiar figure with a pink haori and cherry blossoms on her back, launched himself towards his beloved little sister. Nezuko gasped in surprise as Tanjiro embraced her from behind, sputtering, "Oh Onii-chan. You're safe, Tanjiro thought as he hugged Nezuko tighter. He did not realize how much being separated from Nezuko in battle bothered him until she was back in his arms. He let himself savor the relief for a short moment before pulling back, moving his hands furiously as he signed. We tried to look for you. Can't. Defeated one of the demons. Are you both alright? Nezuko nodded. I'm mostly alright. Inosuke-san got injured from trying to protect me, though. Tanjiro's head snapped towards the boar boy, who he had neglected to greet in his haste to approach Nezuko. He had a few deep cuts all over his body, but he seemed to be as energetic as ever, talking to Zenitsu with wild gestures and bragging about his kill. Inosuke protected his sister in his stead, got injured for her in his stead. Tanjiro could not help the wave of gratefulness he felt as he rushed towards the boar boy and pulled him in a tight hug. He knew in their group, it was his bond with Inosuke which was most affected by Tanjiro's muteness. They did not really have a proper avenue of communication. Inosuke could barely read at this point. Nezuko had offered to teach him Tanjiro's sign language, but the boar boy showed little interest in it, so Tanjiro could not really communicate how thankful he was. He hoped that with that hug, he was able to convey it. He hoped that Inosuke would understand. What is this? An attack? Inosuke sputtered. Or not. Tanjiro pulled back and sighed. He supposed communication with Inosuke was a work in progress. It's a hug, moron. Zenitsu told him. What's a hug? Stop hugging me. It's making me feel all strange and fluffy. Fight me instead. Zenitsu sighed. I still don't get your obsession with fighting. Isn't it enough that we're already in the middle of a mission? We still have 3 more demons to slay, you know. That's 3 too many. The great Hashibira Inosuke could handle 100, no, 200 more of those demons. No, you'll die. Why am I stuck with you madmen? TFFT, Nezuko barely managed to stifle her giggle. Tanjiro could not help but smile as well. There was something very soothing about the 4 of them being all together. Inosuke's brash innocence, Zenitsu's false unfriendliness, Nezuko's reassuring presence, all culminating into a scent that was filled with warmth and fondness. They may not all know each other for that long, but Tanjiro has come to really enjoy Inosuke and Zenitsu's presence. He wondered if Nezuko felt the same. I'm glad you came up the mountain with us, Zenitsu-san. Are you feeling any better? Nezuko asked. Zenitsu's eyes widened before he looked away. Oh, that's right. The last time Nezuko had seen him, he was on the ground having a panic attack, refusing to move. Tanjiro could see the tension in his shoulders and the light redness in his ears. He must be incredibly embarrassed. Why yeah, it's not like Tanjiro would let me bail out, anyway. I at least managed to help him out a bit. Killing that demon. I'm thankful I wasn't completely useless. Tanjiro frowned. He's being modest, he signed to Nezuko. Practically defeated the demon all by himself. Apparently Zenitsu was still listening to his thoughts, or maybe he already picked up some words from Tanjiro's sign language throughout their stay in the wisteria house. The demon would not be surprised. Zenitsu was quite intelligent. That's not true. You saved me a lot from those spider babies. I thought I'd die multiple times. You protected me, too. Tanjiro signed with a shrug. You protected me more. I would like to hear more about that. But we really shouldn't dawdle, Nezuko said, making the 3 boys stand at attention, quitting their friendly banter. The expression on her face was very serious, perhaps even a little nervous. That demon Inosuke and I just defeated. She said something that's quite concerning. She said there's a member of the 12 demon moons on this mountain. Zenitsu's eyes widened, and when he replied his voice was low in a whisper. You're joking. Nezuko shook her head. She turned her head to stare at the pile of clothes sitting on the boulder in the middle of the clearing, perhaps thinking about the demon she had slain, the demon who had given her the information. Her eyes looked sad and sorrowful. I'm not. She really said that. And I think it's true. That demon in her last moments. She embraced death rather than fighting to the end. It makes you wonder what she's so scared of. She hesitated. Before continuing, there was a demon who looked like a kid who warned us while we were fighting earlier, too. He stood way above us on spiderwebs so we couldn't reach him. But he told us not to disturb his family's peaceful life, and even called the person we were fighting Mother. Tanjiro's eyebrows rose in surprise. Mother, a demon family, and a demon moon as well. Tanjiro's hand flew to his chin as he mulled this all over. Zenitsu didn't seem to be up to contemplation though, as he exclaimed in terror. Who cares about that? There's a demon moon on this mountain. This is way above our pay grade, way too high a level for rookies like us. Why did they send us and not a pillar? We should leave this mountain while we can, or we're all going to die. Oh. Inosuke had bonked Zenitsu on the head, sounding exasperated. All you do is whine, 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 whine. Who cares about that demon moon bullshit? We can take them on. No, we can't. Tanjirou, help me make them see sense. As much as Tanjirou didn't like Zenitsu's cowardly side rearing its head once again, he couldn't help but admit that his fear this time was a logical one. Tanjirou had no idea how powerful demon moons could be, so he was worried that it might be more than they could handle. Unfortunately though, he could see the stubborn streak in Nezuko's jaw, the spark of determination in her pink eyes. He remembered what Tameo asked of them, what they had to do to create a cure for Tanjirou, and Tanjirou knew his little sister enough to know he could not stop her from trying her hardest. If we wait for Oyakata-sama to send pillars, then the demon moon might escape. We're already here. We might as well, Nezuko insisted. If you want to go down the mountain, Zenitsu-san, I won't blame you. Zenitsu's hands fisted on his sides. He opened his mouth to speak and hesitated, stared helplessly into Nezuko's eyes and hesitated. Finally, it seemed he had made up his mind. He crossed his arms in front of his chest. Seriously, if Inosuke's gonna fight, and Nezuko-chan is gonna fight, and Tanjirou's gonna fight too, then I'm going to. He swallowed hard. I am not useless, you know. And not. The way he said it made it sound like he was trying to convince himself. But something changed in his expression then, and Tanjirou wondered if he was remembering that he had indeed proven himself in a fight not too long ago, a fight where he dealt the final, decisive blow. Since you all seem so eager to die, I'll watch your backs. Someone had to, at this point. Like hell I'm losing any of you to some scary demon moon. We're all gonna leave this mountain alive and intact, you hear me? Nezuko's eyes widened, before a smile blossomed on her face. Zenitsu-san. Duh, I said, stop making me feel all fluffy. You and Gonpachiro both. Inosuke complained. That fluffy feeling is normal, because we're friends, Zenitsu claimed in a stern tone, as if demanding any of them to refute it. When nobody did, Zenitsu continued. So let's go. The sooner we kill the demons, the sooner we can get out of this mountain. Nezuko side-eyed her companions. Then, where are we headed next? She regarded Tanjirou with an expectant look, familiar with her older brother's sense of smell. She seemed to be under the impression that they could depend on it once again. But unfortunately, now that Tanjirou was back in the thick of the woods, his sense of smell was once again useless. The only reason he has scented Nezuko and Inosuke location earlier was because up in that floating house, they were pretty high up, and the air up there was less contaminated with the scent of demons that seemed to engulf the entirety of the mountain. Tanjirou would need to be back up that house again to be of any help, and he was about to suggest so, but then Inosuke cackled, pulling out his swords. Ha, amateurs, Inosuke huffed, sounding smug. Watch how the great Inosuke can find those demons without breaking a sweat. Take notes, my underlings. Friends, Zenitsu reminded him, sounding mildly offended. Inosuke stabbed both his swords into the ground and concentrated. Beast breathing 7th form, spatial awareness. They waited. It seemed to take Inosuke a long moment to scan the area. It was strange to see Inosuke so still, so quiet, when the boar boy was usually filled with so much motion and energy. But by the time he was done, that energy was back, as he recovered his swords and brandished them to the west with so much enthusiasm and gusto. 2 demons that way. They're pretty strong. I bet the demon moon is there. Let's go. And with that, much like earlier at the base of the mountain, he took off on his own. Inosuke-san. Wait, you're still injured. Nezuko called out as she ran after him. Tanjirou and Zenitsu followed suit. As they whizzed past the trees and ran as fast as they could, Tanjirou could feel something inside him untwisting. It was something that felt like relief that they were all safe, that the 4 of them were back together again. Inosuke with his boundless lust for a fight, Nezuko with her quiet determination, Zenitsu with his hesitant bravery. Now that they were together, Tanjirou could smell their scents, the scents of his comrades, and knowing they had his back was comforting. He wanted to keep this feeling for as long as possible. Inosuke-san, at least let me bandage up your wounds. Nezuko called out as she hurried after him, but the boar boy wasn't hearing it. He continued running, eager for their next fight. Tanjirou could not help but be worried for him, but it's not like Inosuke would listen. He knew from the short time they had known him that Inosuke lived by his own rules, true to his nature as someone who lived on his own all his life. Tanjirou just wished he would at least stop being so reckless, which is a trait that was evident, especially when Inosuke bellowed as soon as they had reached a river and saw a demon girl, found you, and immediately went on the attack. Beast breathing 3rd fang. Devour. Inosuke jumped over the rocks in the river, slashing his blades horizontally in a flurry of movement aimed at his target's throat. The demon seemed caught off guard, but the surprise did not last long. She dodged, opening her palms up to Inosuke and unleashing thick strands of webs that immediately engulfed their beastly friend. Inosuke, Zenitsu called out worriedly. They could hear Inosuke struggle inside the ball of webs, and Tanjiro and Nezuko's eyes met in a split second, their sibling bond making them aware of what the other wanted to do. Tanjiro was going to attack the demon girl, and Nezuko was going to save Inosuke. Nezuko braced to charge, but Zenitsu was faster. In one thunderclap and flash, Zenitsu was already on the other side of the river, prioritizing Inosuke's rescue. He slashed through the webs, the strands falling away with one swing of his sword. Inosuke broke free of his prison with a rage-filled yell, which seemed to alarm the demon girl even more, as she too shouted, "Father!" A huge shadow loomed over Nezuko, and Tanjiro as a beast of a demon fell in front of them, splashing water everywhere. The demon was large and muscular, terrifyingly so, with multiple eyes that looked like a spider's and a mouth that opened up into a collection of sharp fangs. As Inosuke and Zenitsu shouted in alarm, the demon girl started running deeper into the woods, out of their sight, eager to get away from the demon slayers. Inosuke moved to follow her, but Zenitsu held him back. "Don't go, Inosuke. We gotta help Tanjiro and Nezuko-chan." The father demon let out a mighty roar, making the hairs on Tanjiro's neck rise. He walked 2 steps closer towards the siblings, a hand fisted and moving into an arc to punch towards the 2 of them. "Don't come near my family. Stay away." Family, water breathing. First form, water surface slash. Nezuko called out, sidestepping and then taking a stance as she swung her sword in a single powerful slash. She meant to cut the father demon's arm, but the blade only dug a few inches deep into the thick limb, getting stuck halfway through. Nezuko gasped, caught off guard by the hardness of the demon's flesh, but she did not get the chance to pull it out herself as the demon's other fist came flying at her, swatting her away as if she was nothing but a common fly. Nezuko let out a yelp as she flew into the river, water splashing all around her. Worry engulfed Tanjiro's heart, tempted to hurry and check if she was all right, but knowing that it was unwise. Instead, he also took a stance, taking a deep breath as he attacked. Hinakami Kagura, second form, clear blue sky. Tanjiro jumped and spun his body vertically to deliver a 360-degree slash, effectively cutting off one of the father demon's arms. Urakodaki had once told Tanjiro that his Hinakami Kagura had more power than his and Nezuko's water breathing, but Tanjiro had not really seen evidence of that until that moment. The father demon roared in pain and Tanjiro jumped back as a fist came barreling towards him, the injury seemingly only making the demon more violent. At least he had one less fist to be wary about. As soon as he braced himself to attack once more, he heard Inosuke yell behind him, jumping high up in order to deploy a double-bladed slash onto the demon's shoulders. "Where are you looking at?" "I'm over here." "Curse you, Ek." The demon turned around and swatted Inosuke as well with his remaining fist. Inosuke got a mouthful of water, landing near where Nezuko was trying to stand up and move her wet hair out of her face. Tanjiro was relieved that she seemed to be alright, even if she was quite drenched. She was wincing though, evidently bruised by the force of the attack. The father demon was pure muscle and power, that's for sure. Thunder breathing. First form, thunderclap and flash. Zenitsu moved past the father demon, slashing along the back of the demon's foot on the Achilles tendon. Much like Nezuko's attack, it did not cut too deep into the demon's flesh, but because Zenitsu had targeted him on that particular spot, the father demon staggered, falling onto his knees. Tanjiro used that opportunity to get a clear hit on the demon's neck, raising his sword. Hinakami Kagura, first form, dance. The father demon's head fell onto the river with a loud splash. The scent of ashes once again filled the air, and Tanjiro hung his head to pray for the life he had just taken. That's 3 of the 5 demons he could smell down at least, which was progress. The father demon was powerful, but Tanjiro did not think he was one of the 12 demon moons. He was defeated too easily. That didn't stop Nezuko from hurrying over to get the demon's blood before the body fully disintegrated though. Like clockwork, Chachimaru, Tameo's cat familiar, appeared by the riverbank to collect the blood Nezuko had taken. The cat seemed to be able to hide its presence using Yushiro's blood demon art, but the timing at which it appeared made Tanjiro wonder, did Chachimaru follow them everywhere? He did not have time to ponder that thought, as he was immediately distracted by Zenitsu's wailing, scolding Inosuke. "Don't be so reckless. Think about the people who have to save your sorry ass." "I don't need saving. I would have escaped on my own," Inosuke replied confidently. Nezuko just sighed and started pulling out bandages from her haori, taking advantage of Inosuke now standing still in order to tend to his numerous wounds. "But what if you couldn't, huh? We were worried." There's nothing in this world that the great Inosuke can't do. The discussion was clearly going nowhere. Inosuke and Zenitsu had a lot of differences. Inosuke was reckless, Zenitsu was careful. Inosuke was brave, Zenitsu was cowardly. They truly were on different sides of extremes from each other. Tanjiro tapped Zenitsu's shoulder to get his friend's attention and projected his thoughts. "Tell Inosuke for me." Zenitsu hesitated but nodded. Tanjiro faced Inosuke and held both of the boar boy's shoulders, patting them in a firm but affectionate way. "Inosuke," he thought, "please listen to us. It is important to be careful right now, especially when we don't know which of the demons is the demon moon. You don't have to prove anything to us. We already know you're great. All we ask is that you do not throw yourself in danger so that we may be in a better position to work together, to protect each other as friends should." Zenitsu told all that to Inosuke. Inosuke stiffened in response, evidently not used to such concerned words. Not for the first time, Tanjiro was reminded that they were probably Inosuke's first friends, after living in solitude for so long. Inosuke wasn't really used to relying on anyone. He wasn't really used to the idea of working with people. So when the boar boy cleared his throat and turned his head away, murmuring and embarrassed, "Well, if you put it that way, Kentaro," Tanjiro could not help but smile. "Let's go after the demon girl. She couldn't have gotten very far," Nezuko told them as soon as she finished bandaging up Inosuke's wounds. The three boys agreed and soon they went off to follow the trail of the demon girl. Between Tanjiro's nose, Zenitsu's ears, and Inosuke's sensing ability, they were able to follow her without trouble. It helped that they had a pretty good idea of which direction she was headed. As they continued further, Tanjiro felt a bad feeling in his gut. That feeling only worsened when he heard the demon girl scream in pain, her voice nearly sobbing as she cried out, "Rui, I beg of you, please stop." Tanjiro halted in his tracks, his feet skidding against the ground from his speed as he raised a hand to signal his companions to stop. They followed suit. Beyond them was a small clearing, where two figures were, the demon girl and a little demon boy, their white clothes and pale complexions almost glowing in the moonlight. The demon boy stood, looming over the demon girl who was crouched down on the forest floor in agony, blood dripping from the cuts on her face. Tears streamed down her face. Behind him, Tanjiro heard Nezuko gasp. The demon boy, Rui, Tanjiro assumed, turned his head to look at them disdainfully, speaking in a deadpan voice. "What are you looking at? This isn't some show, you know." When Nezuko spoke, her voice was shaky. "What are you doing? Aren't you allies?" That's what Tanjiro thought too. He thought that the demons in this mountain were comrades. The father demon even went so far as to call them their family. And yet, why? Tanjiro could not pick up the scent of love and trust he was so used to smelling between family. Instead, there was a rotten scent of terror, hatred and repulsion between them, as if the two demons could barely stand being in each other's presence. Even so, Rui scoffed, replying with confidence, "Allies, don't put us in the same category as something that flimsy. We're family. We're joined by a powerful bond. And besides, this is between me and my sister." His eyes trailed over from Tanjiro to Nezuko to behind the two of them where Zenitsu and Inosuke stood warily. Something inside those pale blue eyes flashed, an irritation seeping through his gaze. "Why are so many of you still alive? What are mother and father doing? Parents are supposed to protect their children. Are they dead? Useless." Tanjiro felt anger start to rise inside him, at Rui's nonchalant way of referring to his dead family members like they were nothing, at the way Rui was treating his apparent older sister. A powerful bond. A forged bond is what it was. Tanjiro's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. If the three demons they had already slain were not the demon moon, then that must mean Rui was. The demon girl was evidently not as powerful, if Rui was so easily able to subjugate her. It was ironic that the demon with the youngest looking physique ended up being the most powerful of the bunch, but Tanjiro knew his suspicion was true. He could feel it in his bones. It must be an instinct from his demonic nature. He could just tell. "Can we beat him?" Suddenly, Tanjiro was not so sure. There were 4 of them, and their teamwork was impeccable, as earlier seen with their fight with the father demon. But Tanjiro's instincts told him that even that would not be enough. Perhaps the idea of defeating a demon moon on their own was too ambitious. Tanjiro did not like it in the first place, as he disagreed with anything that would put Nezuko in an unacceptable amount of danger. In contrast, Tanjiro was not really concerned about his own welfare. Demons could not really kill each other, not without the use of the sun or Nichiren blades. Tanjiro could get torn into dozens of pieces, and he would turn out fine. His human companions though, if we face him as we are right now. Rui placed a hand over his face, the scent of his irritation building around him, making the air so dense Tanjiro could barely breathe. Someone is going to die. If mother and father couldn't do it, I suppose I have to take care of you all myself. Tanjiro came to a decision. There was only one person in their group who would listen to his rather hasty change of heart. Someone who already wanted to retreat in the first place. Zenitsu, take Inosuke and Nezuko and run. He's stronger than all of us combined. We can't defeat him. Zenitsu perked up, alert. His voice was scared when he replied, what about you? I'll be fine. Send for help if you can. Someone stronger. Tanjiro had never thought something as thin and flimsy as spiderwebs could make a sound as it tore through the air, but he supposed it goes to show that the threads were not flimsy at all. Tanjiro and his companions jumped in different directions to evade the onslaught, and as soon as Tanjiro saw the thread cut through the trees and branches like it's butter, he knew retreating was the smart choice. He turned his head to search Zenitsu's gaze and insisted, more desperate now, go. Zenitsu nodded shakily and ran towards Nezuko and Inosuke. He slung each of them over each of his shoulders and with a thunderclap and flash, hurried as far away as he could, as quickly as possible. Tanjiro heard Nezuko and Inosuke's aborted protests, but they were lost in the air as the smell of lightning and ozone filled the clearing, leaving Tanjiro on his own. As soon as they were gone, Tanjiro immediately relaxed. He may not survive this fight intact, but he was very well going to buy enough time for his friends to get away. No matter what. What? Your friends left you. Some allies they are, Rui spat, no doubt trying to get a dig at Nezuko's earlier comment. Tanjiro did not bother to inform him that it was by choice, that he was the one who recommended it, it didn't matter. Rui continued, well, I'm just going to have to hunt them down later anyway. After I deal with you. Tanjiro's grip tightened on his sword. Rui pulled at his hand, the threads tightening around his fingers. And then, with a violent swing of his arm, the threads flew towards Tanjiro, coming at him at incredible speeds. Tanjiro took a deep breath. Hinakami Kagura. Third form, Raging Sun. Author note: don't skip. I don't know if I can update this fic 2 weeks from now. I have unexpectedly relapsed into my eating disorder a few weeks ago, and I am having trouble writing my fanfics because of it. It has been extremely hard to focus on anything else. I am also starting online classes soon, so I might have to focus on that for the time being. This is the last chapter I have pre-written. If I can't update this fic 2 weeks from now, I will be putting it on hiatus again. I am extremely sorry, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Hope you enjoy this chapter anyway. Edit March 6, 2022. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to write for this story yet because I'm so busy with school. But my mental health is doing well, and I am once again in ed recovery. Please wait patiently. Support this guy, link in the description. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. And comment down your opinion on this video. Thanks for stopping by and I'll see you in the next one.